Hey good people, Batavia here with potatoes. I could not be more excited. So this is the potato haul from the season. I've eaten probably a few pounds from this side. This side represents, in this little bag that I've created, is the potatoes that I harvested back in August. These are the potatoes that I harvested, which we'll walk through in this video. They all are either purple Viking or red Lesota. So purple skin, kind of white yellowish flesh, or a red skin potato, which has a yellowish or whitish flesh inside. So super pleased. We're going to go ahead and dig into the beginning of me planting these potatoes in a few different spaces, and then we'll walk through a couple of shares of how they progress during the season, and then we'll get to actually harvesting the potatoes. Okie doke, so first up is the method that I've used in previous years, and this is planting the seed potatoes that have chitted, they've sprouted, into this trench of sorts, and I'm covering it with soil, and I did that in about 2.5 rows in this bed. Covered it with mulch, watered it well, and just kept an eye on things throughout the season. Now the new method that I was trying, and it's new to me, is a take on the Ruth Stout method. And so this is using spoiled hay, is what she became kind of infamous for. And I don't have access to spoiled hay, so I use straw instead. But one of the big differences is you're planting the potatoes just on top of the soil and then covering the potatoes with whatever that material is, in my case, straw. So I initially added bone meal, that's that white substance you saw me pouring in, added that as kind of nutrients to the soil. This is the beginning of the planting season for this particular raised bed. It's about 36 inches around, and I doubled this bed, so the soil it's sitting on is about 13 inches high, and then I covered it with the straw. So I picked up straw from various places in my garage that I had been saving it from last year. And then I think I came in with some brand new straw that I had purchased back from a home improvement store. So the potatoes look good, and they generally always look good. These last, I think, 4 years I've been growing them. This is basically the maintenance that I did. They were kind of getting in my walkway, so I kind of wrangled them in. Previous years I've done different things. We're trying to manage and maintain potatoes, but this year I kind of just let them do their thing. So these were the signs that this method may be a method for me. Now we get into the harvest. So we'll harvest out of this raised bed, and then we'll also harvest in our containers. So we had about, I think it's 6 containers I also grew in the backyard. But as it relates to this space, and this was the test, this method is generally much cleaner, right? It's, for me, it was less work since I just had to slightly work up the soil and then place the seed potatoes. And I'm just going to spoil it. I mean, I think this is the way. The potatoes are a little bit damp. We've had some rain over the previous couple of days. It's interesting because in the previous garden tour at the beginning of September, I commented on, don't have time to harvest today, but, we don't have rain in the forecast. And sure enough, it rained 3 straight nights. So this had a cover on top of it, so these weren't soaking. And generally everything I've read says you really want to try to harvest potatoes when the soil and the potatoes are dry. So these were pretty okay, not necessarily muddy. Some of the ones in the containers in the back were a bit dirtier than I'd like, but they're all in all fine. This harvest was the moment where I realized it's probably going to be a good potato year for me. So this is where things get fuzzy as far as my notes. I think I planted 2 seed potatoes in this 20-gallon grow bag. My intention this year was to use fewer seed potatoes in my containers to see if it yielded a better result. Over the years, I've planted in containers and been a bit underwhelmed. If you saw last year's potato harvest, I shared that. But this particular container, I mean, it absolutely gives me hope of continuing to grow potatoes in containers. Potatoes generally are something that you want to be careful about when it comes to what you're planting behind it. So in that case, I really want to be able to kind of reserve my garden space where I can. So if I can get potatoes into containers and they grow well, like that's absolutely going to be a part of my plan going forward. So when I look at this, and this is where you can see they're a bit muddier, they didn't have any protection across the rain, so the soil wasn't sopping wet, but again, you can see they're a bit dirtier than the other potatoes. I'm just, this is what I've been waiting for. So this is a 10-gallon grow bag. That also is a purple Viking. I feel like the red Lesotho did better. Maybe I'll go in and do a comparison of the total volume for those two types of potatoes. The red Lesotho I picked up as a 5-pound bag. I don't remember if I used all of the seed potatoes, but I picked it up as a 5-pound bag from like Menards, which is one of our home improvement stores. And then the purple Viking was actually purchased last year, planted, and then I saved some of the potatoes to use as seed potatoes for this year. So once I got closer to winter and I was getting to the end of the potatoes, I picked some good ones up and put them in a brown paper bag and left them in the refrigerator basically all winter, and until the early spring I took them out, started the chitting process. So all in all, I didn't purchase the purple Viking potatoes at all. This is just, again, planting with what I harvested last year, which I think is a win. I feel like I kind of neglected my potatoes all around this year, but this is probably the set of containers that I looked at and managed the least, even from a watering perspective. They were kind of on this deck and a little bit out of sight, out of mind. And because I had something on top of the little cage that I had these potatoes under, these were pretty dry. You can see here I'm losing light. This was a late evening and I was just trying to get it done because we had, again, rain. Late summer, early fall, the rains returned. So I wanted to make sure I got all of these harvested. I think this is probably a lower production. This is what I'd seen in previous years when I described kind of being underwhelmed. All in all, I probably put 1 to 2 seed potatoes, maybe 2 for sure in each of those containers. So, I mean, generally, that's a win. Yeah, so when it comes to what was produced from it. Okie doke. So, you saw each area that I planted the potatoes in this video and what the yield was. This is the only set of potatoes, and these are the ones that were grown in the raised bed that I initially showed you at the beginning of the video, me planting in. These were harvested off camera back in August, and I've been eating out of these, but I've tallied everything up because I did track how much I harvested originally from that raised bed. I have 41 pounds of potatoes that I grew this year. That is more than double in some cases, but I'm going to say double the amount that I've grown in any single year previously. That's good stuff. So, and I wish I really could pinpoint what I did differently. Clearly, the Ruth Stout method is something that I did differently. I've never grown potatoes in that way, and that's a winner chicken dinner for me. I'm definitely, when I use raised beds, I'm definitely going to grow them that way. And again, that's just planting the seed potato on top of the soil, and then I'll continue to use straw as kind of the mulch, but a really thick layer of straw. I think I did like 8 inches of the straw, and I think it did super well. It was so much easier to harvest those potatoes compared to anything else that I grew, so super pleased with that. Let's see, the containers that I planted in, I definitely did add bone meal at the time of planting, as well as an all-purpose granular fertilizer. Now, I definitely know that there are recommendations on specific NPK ratios when it comes to growing potatoes. I basically just used what I had on hand. And then you saw me planting in the round raised bed. And if I recall, I didn't add any granular fertilizer and I only went with the bone meal. to be quite honest, I don't remember if that was intentional or it was just something that I didn't have it right at hand, and so I just went ahead and planted as is. So I felt like I kept everything watered well throughout the season, with maybe the exception of the rectangle containers that are on the deck. I probably neglected those a bit. I did not come back in and top dress and add any additional fertilizer or a bone meal or anything throughout the season. It wasn't necessarily a very intentional decision. I just didn't get to it. And I'm not saying that that's the formula, like that's the thing that worked, but it's nice to see what you can get when you don't, right? Let's see what else. Yeah, I planted both of them pretty close together in mid-May, harvested these after everything had died back in all cases. This was like in mid-August. These were somewhere around, the second week of September. So all of these potatoes could have been harvested weeks before they actually were. But if you followed me, for any amount of time, thank you. You know that sometimes some of my crops stay in the garden a bit long. And if you're new here, thank you. Now you know that some of my crops stay in the garden. If they can hold, I leave them in the garden a bit longer. I just hadn't got around to the potatoes, and that's all it was. What are we going to do with these? All right, so when I was harvesting them on this section, great aunt called me and I said, I'll give you a call back. I'm digging up potatoes. So when we were chatting, I was telling her I hadn't weighed anything, and I was telling her like I'm super excited, like this is a good year. And she asked me which ones I grew, and I told her, red skin potato. And she's like, oh, why'd you grow red skin potato? I'm like, well, it's recommended. That's like a really good type of potato to grow if you are canning, or even if you purchase them. I purchased mine last year from the grocery store to try pressure canning them. And so yeah, that's the plan. I'll do a couple of quarts that are just potatoes, maybe with some chicken stock. I have right now chicken in my refrigerator that I will make kind of the meal in a jar. There are a couple of recipes in the Ball canning book that has like the bluish background, bluish, tealish, greenish color background. I think it's from 2016. I've become all about the meals in a jar. I find that it's the best way for me to get a home cooked meal, like in the middle of a day when I didn't plan what I was going to eat for lunch, especially for lunch. And I tried last year the chicken chili verde, and I really enjoyed it. It's a tinge bit salty, but I really enjoyed it. I also tried, maybe it wasn't from that book, but kind of pot roast in a jar, maybe it was. Again, really enjoy the convenience, and those are some of my favorite things to eat. And so we're going to do a few more of those recipes, and then I'm also going to save seed potatoes. Depending on what my recipes call for, if I end up using all of my red skin potatoes in my recipes and just eating in meals, my hope is that I'll see the red Lesotho, which I've enjoyed because I've of course eaten some of these. I'll see the red Lesotho in the store next year, since it's really reasonably priced, all things considered. Separate note from the harvest, Kennebec is also on my list of potatoes that I had wanted to grow, and then more recently a couple of gardeners commented saying that they had gotten really successful yields from growing Kennebec, so I'm adding that to next year's list. All right, is that everything that I wanted to cover? I could talk about potatoes forever. Oh, wait, no. Curing them. So these are more than a month since I dug them up. The ones over here are just a week old as far as when I harvested them. They're going to go into my basement on a flat surface. I think I'm going to put them underneath the stairs. There's a little bitty cut-in closet. And so that's going to be a dark space. I can let these basically cure. Skins continue to harden. They're pretty tough based on me leaving them in the garden until all of those plants had died back. So I think I'm pretty good with these, but I did want to keep them separate because I want to use these first, since they were harvested. I still feel like I'm pretty new to growing potatoes. This is the fourth season that I've grown them. So I am all ears on any suggestions. I know that I showed pieces of what I did this year, but if you have any suggestions on how to get a better yield, let me know. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to drop those below, and I'll see you all on the next one.